Josue, can you see where the microphone is? See what I did?
Yeah.
This is such a big presentation. I want you to know that Ed Capabianca, my friend from Wharton, combed his hair. I mean, he is so ready for this. Nothing.
It was about time. You
First,
told me that you haven't touched this subject in 8 years.
We have never talked about market access in Mexico. And I have another special guest today. His name is Mauro Aceves, and he es uno mexicano.
Thank you. Thank you, yo. Great meeting you, everyone.
Introduce yourself.
Mauro, where are you from?
I'm from Mexico City. But currently, I'm living in Brantford, Connecticut. I've been in the United States for the last 24 years. I have a biomedical engineering degree, also my master's in business administration, and I have spent the last 30 years of my life in medical industry, right? And I have the pleasure to meet Joe probably about 10 years ago when we worked at Cardiac Science. So great guy, as you all know, and I learned, and I keep learning from him a few tricks.
It was a highlight of his life that day, remember?
That's correct. That's correct. It was very welcoming to find and to meet a former East Coaster or New Yorker in Seattle. So I appreciated that. So that's so great. Oh, cool.
Just so you know, and this is pre-pandemic I'm talking, but Mauro is a hugger.
Yes, true.
Oh, yeah. Pretty much all Mexicans are huggers.
Now, I appreciate you had to write out phonetically how to say your name, and I was like, I've never seen it with the U, and I know now it's Josue. It's like sway your hips.
Yeah.
Josue. So you have to thank me for that. You have to thank me for that.
Was it you who told me how to say it?
Mauro, yes, absolutely.
No, Mauro, I know, but our guest today.
No, it was
you're the one who told me it's like Hosway. There's a way to pronounce it.
Look, don't
it's Joshua in English. Joshua is a very common name in the US. But yeah, a lot of people are not familiar with the Spanish name. They're more familiar with Jose, with Joe.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we are going to talk today about market access in Mexico. You are welcome to just talk with us a bit to start, or if you want the screen, let me know. This is your show.
Yeah, I'll do the screen so I can highlight some, make it more illustrate some of the information that I'm sharing with you guys, and just as a general intro. Well, I hope that this information is useful for everyone. I hope to provide good tips and actionable resources for you guys. The US and Mexico, I mean, we're neighbors. So it's very important for you guys to know how to approach the Mexican market. It's a market that has challenges, many challenges, but it also has good opportunities. So I'll touch a little bit of that information and just a general overview about Mexico. We'll go also into the COFEPRIS, which is the Mexican FDA, talk a little bit about that. Talk about ways to access the market, different pathways, which are 3. It's pretty simple. And we'll talk a little bit about distributors and key actors in Mexico, just so you can feel comfortable with the information, with the landscape. And finally, a little bit about the services that we provide in Insumos. So just a little intro about myself. I'm Josue Garza. I'm the Director of Business Development and Operations at Insumos para la Salud. What does Insumos para la Salud mean in English? Health supplies, as easy as that. And I know you Americans love acronyms, so IPS is, just refer to it as IPS and you'll be good to go. It's a consulting firm focused in medical devices, all classes and categories. We're based in Mexico City, I'm personally based out of Chicago, Illinois. We have a commercial office here, so that's something that we're trying to move forward here in the US. We don't intend to get into FDA or any other sanitary authorities, our goal is to be able to make that bridge for companies in the US going into Mexico, for them to feel comfortable, to have the information that they need in order to have success in our country. And well, that's pretty much it.
¿Cuántas personas tienen?
En la compañía tenemos 10. We have 10 people working, but we also have service providers. We have partners as well.
Okay.
So,
and what's your role there?
Excuse me?
What is your job there?
Director of Business Development and Operations. So getting, setting up new processes for the company, obtaining new clients, making sure that all the teams are working and all the company is working up to speed and it's operational. I do a little bit of marketing as well. So it's a small company, it's a small business, but we serve global clients as well as national clients. So yeah, we've been in insumos. It started 25 years ago with the intention of commercializing and also manufacturing an IUD, and that plan failed because the U.S. government donated many millions of IUDs to the U.S. government donated millions of IUDs to the Mexican government, so there was no market to them. So we started participating in public policy efforts with some chambers, important chambers that are relevant for the industry, and then we transitioned to a consulting company, helping, for the most part, foreign companies, foreign manufacturers to enter the Mexican market. And then we added the hosting service, which is being able to be an authorized representative for these companies if they need it. And yeah, we're trying to expand and provide different services to be a 360 consulting firm from beginning to end.
Okay. You have the presenter rights if you want to fire up your slide.
So should I go to webcam?
No, you've already got webcam. That's your pretty face. Here, I'll see if I can't highlight it for you again. Make presenter. And then make presenter.
Oh, I need to set my system preferences. Give it. It'll be fast.
Okay, then I've just made everybody's mic live. Michelle, why did your eyes get big for IUDs? You have to unmute yourself, though, love.
What?
When he said we tried to make IUDs, you went like this.
Oh, I was checking an email.
Oh, the timing was just so perfect. I thought you were like, of all the things you're trying to. And we're back. Okay.
All right.
Your slides you just jumped over to. Yeah. And now if you make that screen size.
All right.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, there we go.
There we go.
There we go.
All right. So feel free to stop me at any point if you have any questions or reach out to me afterwards. So as I said before, we're going to give a general overview about Mexico. Then we're going to talk a little bit about distributors, COFEPRIS, the Mexican FDA, time to market, and a little bit about our services. So Mexico, what does it look like? Mexico is a country with approximately 130 million people. So that's a big country. It's the largest producer of medical devices in Latin America, and it's number 8 exporting country of the world in medical devices. It's interesting how the relationship between Mexico and the US is in terms of medical devices. Mexico is the #1 supplier of medical devices to the U.S. 90% of Mexico's exports of medical devices go to the U.S. and 65% of the imports come from the U.S. And some of the important or most relevant products that are commercialized or also exported from Mexico to the US are medical, surgical, dental instruments and devices, orthopedic devices, and respiratory therapy. So as I don't know if you're familiar with Mexico and its landscape. So in the northern part of Mexico, we have the maquilas, and you have a lot of multinational global medical device companies that have their strategy is more towards the long term, and they take advantage of trade agreements between Mexico and the US, or Mexico and the European Union, or other countries, and they also take advantage of the cheap labor and also qualified labor. So there's a lot of manufacturing of medical devices in that northern part of Mexico. So those would be the companies that you would see in the northern part of Mexico, whereas in the centralized Mexico City, you would see more corporate setting. You would see distributors pretty much in different parts around Mexico City, around Mexico in general. So that's kind of like the general landscape.
Can I say, Mexican companies do ineffective public relations to the United States. I can't name one Mexican medical device company. And that's just, maybe Joe is stupid, I accept, but I can't even, I've never heard of your FDA equivalent. In fact, right now I was afraid to say it out loud because I would say it wrong.
Right. Mexico is interesting because it is not considered to be a technological hub or a innovative scientific hub at all, or country. It was more being considered to be a manufacturing country, right? And also a consumption, a good market for consumption. However, that is changing, and I'll touch that further along. But for example, we do have a Silicon Valley, and that is in Guadalajara, Jalisco, and there are many startups there that are receiving support from universities such as the Tec de Monterrey, other chambers, and where they are developing products and they are looking for investments, right? So if you're looking into coming into Mexico with your investor cap and looking into what are they doing, what technologies they're building, you would go to Guadalajara, to the Mexican Silicon Valley, and look at that, for sure.
Mauro, I know that you have been in America most of your adult life, but I can't help but ask, as a fellow Mexican, how familiar are you with the medical device industry in Mexico?
I can tell you that Josue is going to give me a very good understanding of the current situation, because the only thing that I know from Mexico right now, it's distribution channels, right? A big transnational companies making business with Mexico. When I left Mexico, again, 24, 25 years ago, I mean, this wasn't a setting for development for medical devices, right? And it's interesting that you talked to that point right now, Josue, because I was speaking to some of one client yesterday, my consulting company, saying, you know, 25 years ago, 30 years ago, this could not happen in Mexico. Now it's so completely different. So I was bringing that point to them yesterday, as a matter of fact. So it's different now. And I know now
how I said I couldn't name a single company in Mexico. Are most of the major companies in Mexico the Mexican division of an American company?
That is correct.
Like Medtronic Mexico kind of thing?
Right.
Yeah, Edward, GE, Philips, and Josue. I won't steal your thunder, so
No, go ahead.
yeah. So that's exactly what it is.
what is the name of the biggest company that isn't America headquartered? Can you think of it?
No, not really. There's a big company called Ambiderm, which is based in Jalisco, and they do gloves, a lot of relevant products now for COVID-19, right?
Mm-hmm.
I called them recently and I was like, hey, do you have any gloves? No, nothing. They don't have anything. China
Mm-hmm.
bought everything like in January. And they're waiting for Ambiderm would be one of the biggest ones in terms of that. But yeah, as Mauro said, there are not big medical device companies in Mexico, Mexican companies. Most of the companies that we have in Mexico are international. Lots of American companies, European companies, Japanese as well, German. So yeah, that's pretty much. But as I said, I could perceive this changing in the next 20 to 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I think COVID-19 right now, it's presents a good opportunity because there are many Mexican companies, even that are their sectors might be the aerospace sector, for example, that are now looking into the health industry and saying, well, I better get to it. I better get looking into the medical device industry, not so much the pharmaceutical industry, more medical device industry, and see what I can do, to change my production, to look into it, to manufacture some of the goods in Mexico.
Okay, vamos a ver.
Right.
Okay.
And we use one last point is, for example, one reference point, which is always really interesting, is Medica, right? In Germany, the largest, as you all know, the largest trade show in medical industry, right? Probably about 5-6 years ago, that was the first time Mexico went with a full pavilion, right? And you see this little pavilion with 5, 6, 7 companies, homegrown, trying to make anything from monitoring systems or patient monitors all the way to incubators and anesthesia machines. So the industry and the idea is there. But anyway, I think it's still going to take time, as Josue rightfully said.
No, well, now that you touched this subject, one of our biggest cheerleaders in the government was ProMéxico, which was part of the Ministry of Economy. And ProMéxico was the one, also relevant to this slide, that pushed forward to make the medical device industry a strategic industry in Mexico, because it contributes to the overall GDP. There is a lot of there's a lot of people being benefited from the medical device industry in Mexico, and with the new changing government in December of 2018, they killed ProMéxico completely. So now you won't have that cheerleader for Mexican companies. They went to Medica through ProMéxico, most likely, or to other trade shows, because ProMéxico had a really good DNA of the medical device industry and created reports and partnered with consulting companies such as KPMG, or they partner as well with PricewaterhouseCoopers. They developed good information about the industry in Mexico. So it was a great source of information, and as I said before, it was a cheerleader for the industry, and now we don't have that. So now all of these efforts are run by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which, I mean, we do have diplomatic representations worldwide, but they don't focus in medical devices solely. So we can expect our medical device industry to be limited now with attracting investment into Mexico, and also launching companies to the world from Mexico. Yeah. So I'm going to touch a little bit about the challenges in Mexico. Corruption is one, and still one of them, unfortunately. So it's very important that if you look into working to Mexico, you partner with reputable companies that have like good anti-corruption, and you create that trust with them so they can open their books up, for you, and you make sure that there's no corruption scandals. Also, there's corruption in COFEPRIS as well. There was before the transition of government in December of 2018. There was a lot of talk about how government officials from COFEPRIS were sitting on some submissions from companies, and even though they were entered before, they were sitting on them and prioritizing on other companies. So that is a very big red flag for the industry as a whole. So with this new change of government, their big flag is, how do we get rid of corruption, right? So they're trying to find ways, different strategies, different programs to get rid of corruption. And that is slowing processes a little bit, but we haven't really seen like the results of this campaign for anti-corruption. Also, institutionalization. So with change of governments, you can think that you have to relearn how things are done in COFEPRIS again, like you have to relearn how the government is going to approach the medical device industry. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the FDA and other health authorities have processes institutionalized. And no matter what government comes and goes, things are going to run smoothly because processes are strong and institutionalized. In Mexico, there's some challenges between that, and you might not expect that. Submissions to COFEPRIS take a long time. There's been a very big improvement in approval times, but another challenge with submission is they need a hard copy, and it's not like in the FDA where you can if you're savvy enough, you can have your templates ready and everything ready to go and execute. In Mexico, it's not like that. They still need the hard copy, and right now with COVID-19, it's very hard. We wish there were e-submissions for medical devices. And tenders are the biggest market to sell in Mexico is the public sector, the government. So there is challenges in public tenders, how they launch them, the time to respond to them, the lack of transparency for them, but all of these are things to consider as challenges. Why invest in Mexico? I always give 3 reasons. 1, there's an aging population. The average age is 77. The life expectancy, more or less, is 77 years old. The medical device industry in Mexico shouldn't look into millennials like other industries look for. Millennials you should be focusing on the aging population, and you have to look at this in the 20, 50-year span. There's an increase of chronic diseases. Unfortunately, 50% of the deaths in Mexico are caused by cardiovascular diseases, diabetes, cancer, renal insufficiency. I think Mexico is number 1 in diabetes, childhood diabetes. We love our Coke, our bread, and we eat a lot, unfortunately. But that's hopefully changing. There's been some efforts with changing the rule of labeling for food products. And there's also
just a sec, Eddie, dare you wade into these waters that you left a private note to everyone on the call?
Are there what?
There you go. You're not muted, but I can't hear you.
What do you mean, Joe?
No, Ed Capabianca.
Oh,
I
Ed.
can't hear you, but I see your
Oh.
microphone is live. User error, man. Okay, well, he just, at the risk of derailing us, maybe I'll just mention what Ed wrote, because he sent it to everybody, that he said that Josue's view of the US is correct up until this current administration. Let's move on.
Correct. We're not
I'm also
going into
interested
politics.
in what, I didn't really follow the whole NAFTA and whatever the new acronym is. I wonder what impact that may have had, but let's table that. I'm more interested in what you've prepared here right now, please.
Hey,
Well,
Josue, one question before we continue. What's the average approval time for a medical device in Mexico right now for the COPE3? Without considering all the things.
I'll touch that in the upcoming slides, Mauro. Yeah, I'll cover it for sure. The answer, it depends on the pathway that you choose to submit.
Keep going.
Sure. So another reason why invest in Mexico, there's Mexico's government, the public sector has a consolidated purchase system. So the institutions that participate, the government institutions that participate in this consolidated purchase system are IMSS, ISSSTE, INSABI, Pemex, Marina, and Sedena. So just to break it down, IMSS is all of those workers that are employed by a private company, you know. So the employer is responsible for and the government providing IMSS Social Security. That's like the Social Security for private workers. So there is a very big base, of course, and it's by law that they need to be protected with Social Security. So IMSS looks after those employees from the private sector. ISSSTE is for the employees of the state. So all of those people working in government agencies, they are covered by ISSSTE. INSABI is for all of those persons in Mexico that they don't have a formal employer. They don't belong to the government, so they're the ones that don't have any type of insurance. So Seguro Popular was the name before, and now with the new government, it turned into INSABI. So that's for everyone else who doesn't have a insurance, a health insurance, or they can't have health coverage. Pemex is for all those workers that work in the Mexican oil company, right? So Pemex is an oil industry. It's a very big, you would say, government company. So that's also part of the consolidated purchase system. Marina and Sedena are defense, army, right? So they also participate in purchasing medical devices, medical equipment, pharmaceuticals as well. So that's the biggest market in Mexico right there, right? The government and all of those different institutions make for most of the purchases. And there's also a system called Compranet where probably your distributor would go into and participate in tenders, and all of the rules are set there, all of the responses are set there. Last month, the government launched the Compendio Nacional de Insumos para la Salud, which is a list of almost 15,000 codes of what the government is going to buy, right? what the government is going to buy in pharmaceuticals, medical devices, all the health supplies. It was just launched last month in April. And before, it was known as Cuadro Básico en Catálogo de Insumos para la Salud. It was siloed. So now it's all compiled into one, into the Compendio Nacional de Insumos para la Salud. So you could look into it if you want to see what the government is intending to buy. So relevant actors in Mexico, if you're trying to, if it's the first time going to Mexico, I would advise to contact your diplomatic representation. They have the economic or trade sections, and they know the landscape about the country. The US Department of Commerce has this website called trade.gov, where they talk about the healthcare product and services. It's a very good resource to know what's happening in Mexico, how the healthcare system and who the actors are. So I'd advise to check that website and look into it. Some big associations, the biggest one I would consider and the most relevant one is AMID, the Mexican Association of Medical Device Innovative Industries. Right now, the president of this association is the CEO of Medtronic in Mexico. So that's a good news because it's receiving a lot of focus now. He's a very savvy businessman and person. He knows Mexico very well, and you would find good resources through AMID. A lot of international companies are associated with AMID, and they launch some publications, some information about the industry. So that's also very good. Canifarma is the medical device section of the National Chamber of Pharmaceutical Industry. Canifarma is also a good asset. There's also some clusters if you're looking for a major investment, long-term investment. The clusters in the Californias, the Biomed cluster in Juarez. If you're looking into that, go to those chambers, and see who the players are there, what companies are already established, talk to them. As I said before, the Mexico Silicon Valley in Guadalajara, Jalisco, it's a good place if you're looking to make an investment for a startup. And ProMexico, if you're able to still find some information that they published back in the day, it is very useful, relevant even today. Well, and all I have to say about ProMexico is that our cheerleader is dead for now. So yeah, that's pretty much the relevant actors. So things to keep in mind before going to Mexico and what to expect. It's very important to set the right expectations. A lot of companies, a lot of our clients go into Mexico not having the right expectations. So it's very important to have them in order to minimize risk and to know what you're getting into. So it's not about getting COFEPRIS approval. It's more than that. It's about partnering with distributors that give you good opportunities and are familiar with the importation process or with the tender process. You want them to be able to sell to the public, to the government, to the public sector. And also, some of them have a lot of strengths selling to the private sector, to hospitals. You want to have resourceful partners. You want to be able to adapt to changes in government, natural disasters such as an earthquake, or the circumstances today, COVID-19. And just as a side note, with the earthquake, there was a major earthquake, I think 2 years ago, and it affected COFEPRIS. A lot of files, a lot of submissions that were physically, as I said before, you have to submit it in a hard copy, were lost in the earthquake. So yeah, that is a challenge, and you have to expect that natural disasters also play a part in in the ability of doing things in Mexico. You have to be prepared for the good, the bad, and the ugly. You have to look into Mexico into a long-term strategy, not a short-term one. You have to be patient. And we get a lot of comparisons between Mexico and Brazil. Yeah, we're both Latin American countries, but our language is different, even that's different. But also, you cannot have the same strategy for Mexico and Brazil, just saying, oh, we're going to Latin America. No, they're different countries with different processes, with different health authorities, the people, the consumers, the end consumers, they're different too. So
Josue,
I wouldn't. Yes.
May I offer how embarrassing that line is? That to me just shouts stupid American. I know that's not what you mean. I'm far more of a jerk than you, but it really is like, really? I mean, we both speak Spanish. No, we don't even actually.
Yeah.
So it should be the same thing. It's just mind-blowing that that could be a thing, but I suppose it is.
Yeah, I guess the comparison comes with the market size. I think that's where the main comparison comes with, you know, with the market size. Like they expect to have the same results or similar results of selling a product in Mexico and Brazil, and that just can vary. It can vary. Even Brazil is huge. It's a huge country. So how, like, the distribution in Brazil is challenging. So yeah, I would go into Mexico just seeing it as its own market. You know, in Latin America, yes, if you already translate your instructions for use or you know, make that investment in Spanish translations when you get COFEPRIS approval, then yes, use those translations to go to Spanish-speaking countries. But that's it, you know, like I would say that's it, you know.
You probably know that I specialize in marketing, and your value proposition is so clear to me. I wish everyone on the call had one as clear as yours, and that is, if you're planning on doing business in Mexico, call Josue. I mean, it just is as clear as that, because there's everything you talked about today is foreign to me. I don't mean a pun there. It is new to me.
Yeah, well, my intention is to provide an overall view about doing business in Mexico and for you guys to feel comfortable. I don't have a scientific background or anything like that. But I mean, I believe that,
and that's really important.
Yeah.
Kind of, if you'll indulge me, the value prop that I offer, like, I don't know how to do what Michelle does. Michelle does. Go talk to Michelle. Right. So I don't have to know 1345 nonsense. I know somebody who does.
Right.
My bud Larry, he's a former FDA guy. Go talk to him. I don't know what the hell Ed does, but you get the idea.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, no, feel free to reach out if you have any questions, for sure. And I hope that this information is useful for all of you.
By the way, I also want to take an administrative note and say I'm thrilled for first time joining. Larry Lugo will show his face later if he's willing. And well, Steve Bixby was here, but he had technical trouble. But I always like to let first time premium folks say hi. So we'll do that later. Larry, be on lookout for that. Please continue.
Okay, so now I'm gonna touch very briefly distributors. So heads up, there's lack of data. There are a lot of companies with @Gmail, @Hotmail accounts. That for me means lack of formality, you know, like but that's the reality in Mexico. So be prepared for that, you know. Lots of distributors don't have a website. So, yeah, Michelle.
To Josue's point, back when I was in industry, the last time I was working with Mexican distributors, one of them literally ran a chicken farm and a distribution company. I swear.
Yeah.
I believe you.
All I could do was ask, please don't keep the devices we ship you in the chicken house.
Yeah. Well, that's a good ask. Yeah. So with distributors, you have like you'd be able to find someone that does have a reputable website, a reputable domain, like has experience with your product, or some that they don't, and they're looking this as a opportunistic way of doing business for them, not for you or for the product or for the health of the Mexicans, but for them. Most likely you would get contacted by distributors in trade shows, in expos. Like they like that face-to-face, they like to have that conversation, that texting, and no emails, they like to have that face-to-face and that, yeah, go ahead.
No, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, they like to have that face-to-face and that personal relationship with you. Some of them are looking for exclusivity of your products in the Mexican market. And heads up, make sure that they at least have their operating license and health responsible person before COFEPRIS. Make sure that they have procedures in place for distributors, their warehouse, the post-market surveillance. Like these are things that they should have because COFEPRIS demands that, it's by law. And you'd be surprised how many distributors have, their operating license, but they don't have a post-market surveillance procedure. And they're part of the post-market surveillance phase. So make sure that your distributor also is knowledgeable about participating in the import process. They would most likely be in charge of importing your products into Mexico, about labeling them, back labeling them, and about participating in tenders. Do your due diligence. Right now, what I'm showing in the image in the slide is a scorecard that we have developed to help foreign manufacturers, foreign clients to know what things they should look for in a distributor, right? So first of all, you have the adherence to COFEPRIS, what I said before. Do they have their operating license, their operating procedures, company information? Are they out there? Do they exist, or do they or they don't? What partnerships do they have? How many years do they have in the market? Do they have any presence in expos, or are they just not attending anywhere? And what is their product understanding? So we've developed this scorecard, which we think it's very useful. So we can help you to ask those questions, and to get more comfortable to what should you request for this distributor, because there's literally been clients that their distributors just fail to respond. They have contracts with IMSS or with some other entity in the Mexican government, and they just disappear. So you have to do your due diligence. Even though we have this scorecard, even though we can advise you, you have to go to do your due diligence. You cannot finalize an agreement with a distributor just by phone. You have to be able to at least send a guy there, would most likely be your sales guy who's looking for Latin America, and just make sure that things are checking off and kind of like making sense. That would be my advice with distributors. So now moving forward with COFEPRIS, the Mexican FDA.
Josue, is that possible that that guy could be your team that goes and makes that in-person connection?
Yes, that would be possible as well. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. We can do that for sure. So COFEPRIS, well, the regulation in Mexico, no? COFEPRIS is the Federal Commission for Protection Against Sanitary Risks. It's decentralized from the Ministry of Health. It regulates everything: marketing, imports, exports, distribution, advertising, production. And right now it's, well, with the changing government in 2018, late 2018, there's a new commissioner with a new team. And as I said before, it's kind of like relearning things, how they're gonna work now, etc. A very big difference between the past administration to today's administration is third-party reviewers, which we'll look into it in a little bit. But basically, the previous administration was a very big cheerleaders for third-party reviewers to expedite approvals. And this administration is like, no third-party reviewers. We don't want to work with them that much. And we'd rather have a review process that is without any third parties involved. So I said before, Mexico has a robust regulation. It takes its foundations and principles from the GHTF and the now IMDR. And it also has its local laws, which comprises from the general health law, the health supplies bylaws, the Mexico Pharmacopeia, and the standards such as good manufacturing practices, labeling, post-market surveillance. So in a timeline, some relevant information. In 2010, there's an agreement, the Equivalency Agreement, which considers equivalent those products already authorized by the FDA and by Health Canada. So if they already been evaluated by those agencies, then they would get a faster review and an easier access to the market. In 2011, they launched the program of authorized third-party reviewers. In the US, you have a similar program. And basically, there is a big backlog back in 2011 with submissions. So they need to outsource that, right? They need to create this authorized third-party reviewers, which an application, instead of going to COFEPRIS, it goes to a third-party reviewer, it gets pre-approval, then it goes to COFEPRIS, and COFEPRIS, in theory, would be faster to review your application because it's already pre-approved, right? In 2012, you have the equivalency agreement with Japan. So there are only 3 equivalency agreements in Mexico so far in medical devices: FDA, Health Canada, and Japan. In 2013, the checklists were implemented, and in 2016, there's an expansion of these third-party reviewers. And in 2016, there's participation of companies, and you have 19 third-party reviewers that are authorized in Mexico, right?
Josue, what do you mean with equivalence agreement? Does that mean you have the license to, or the clearance to sell in Japan, for example? And in what level of license did you get if there's some reciprocity?
No, so basically Mexico considers equivalent those products that are authorized by the FDA, Health Canada, and MHLW. So when you try to register a product in Mexico and they already have that approval, you need to see if all the criteria applies for that product and how the product was approved in order to submit it through the equivalency agreement route, and in theory get a faster market approval because it already has the sign off from those agencies.
So it's not the other way around, that a Mexican company can now benefit from, have some form of
no
reciprocity or something with it. Okay, got it.
Right. So there are, yes.
I have some clients that have got some very old, long-standing products that got 510K clearance like in the 80s. Is that something that does it matter like how old the 510Ks are to be kind of recognized under this equivalency?
So in order to qualify for the, I'm putting this as an example for the FDA Equivalency Agreement, the company needs to have the establishment inspection report. They need to have a device master file. For a class 1 device, it would be just a summary. For class 2 and 3, it would be full reports. The device registration listing, 510K or PMA approval, the certificate to foreign government, which is what allows you to export, and post-market surveillance report. So those are pretty much the criterias that we would look into first to see if your device qualifies for a FDA equivalency agreement route, right? So what are the advantages if it does qualify through this route? Less documents are needed. There's a reduction in project costs. There would be less documents to be translated. That's what I'm referring to. The government fees are the same. If you have subcontracted manufacturers like Singapore, US, all over the world, then you don't need their legal work as long as your application in the FDA is already approved, you know, and you get an expedited review. So it makes it easier and less costly to submit through this route, but you need to know if you qualify or not. And these are mainly the criteria. But obviously, every device is different, so we would have to look into it on a case-to-case basis. I don't know if that answered your question.
Not really, but we can talk about it offline.
Okay. So in Mexico, you have 4 classes and 6 categories. In Europe, I think you have IVDs as separate. It's medical devices and IVDs. In Mexico, IVDs are category number 3, diagnostic agents. So you have 6 categories, and you have 4 classes. The low risk class, in 2011, there was a list published of 96 products that are considered to be low class, and they provide very minimal. And in order to register them, your application is very minimal. It's like pretty much admin stuff that you submit. And in 2011 and 2014, there are lists that now compiled over 2,000 products that are deregulated. So it's a first step, you know, to look into these lists to see if your device falls or not in that class. And other than that is class 1, 2, and 3, depending on the risk in user, pretty straightforward. Yeah, a class 1, class 2, and class 3 is not pretty translatable to other authorities, you know, to how devices are classified in other markets. But it's basically on the user risk level. Or if it's a device that it has been recently accepted in the medical device, it would fall into class 3. It would just depend. There are 3 registration routes in Mexico. One is the standard review process. The other one is the authorized third-party reviewer. And the third one is the equivalency agreement route, right? So the standard review process is pretty straightforward. You prepare your application, you submit it to COFEPRIS. Now you could wait from 3 to 8 months to get COFEPRIS approval, and you're ready to go to the market, right? This time, is very estimated for approval times. Back in 2018, also 2019, you could expect approval times of 1 year or more, right? Right now with COVID-19, review times are suspended. So we can expect the 3 to 8 months to increase a little bit. But yeah, that's the pretty straightforward path to submit an application. The authorized third-party reviewer path, it's an optional, right? You would prepare your application as a standard review process, and instead of sending it to COFEPRIS, as I said before, you send it to the third party, you get pre-approval, get submitted to COFEPRIS. The approval times, 3 to 6 months, they've been very standard since 2014. So it's a very stable, route. But as I said before, with this new commissioner, he said, first entries, first exits, no matter which route you're submitting with. If the first application to be submitted to be the first application to be reviewed, right? So with this message, you're saying, well, are third-party reviewers relevant now? Is it worth paying almost double to get pre-approval from a third-party company if my application is going to be authorized 2 months before than with the standard review time? Probably not. So that's shifting. And the equivalency agreement route, as I said before, less administrative procedures, review times about the same as the standard review process. Time to market. So this is what our process looks like. So first we would talk to you, talk about, learn about your product. We would ask for your ISO certificate, your pre-sale certificate, your instructions for use, labels, brochure, to get a good understanding of your product. Then we would prepare the strategy according to your product needs and set the registration route. When preparing for market approval, we would send you the checklist, review all the technical and administrative information. At this point, if you're working with a registration holder, an authorized representative, you would have to tell this registration holder who your distributors will be. And here you can name as many distributors as you want or as little as you want. The point of here is to make sure that these distributors are going to appear in your registration and that they don't have any exclusivity on you if you go through the authorized representative. And if they don't prove to be the right partners, you can always modify your registration and eliminate them and add some more or a different one, okay? Translations and notary service. These are expenses. Well, these are services that would most likely be the most expensive part of your project. So that's important to keep in mind because a lot of companies don't take into account that translations are expensive and there are a lot of documents that need to be submitted in Spanish. So this would represent, for example, if a project might have like 36% of the total project cost in translations, notary services, you would have 20-some% in consulting services, 20-some% in third-party reviewer services, right? So that would be more or less how the project would be composed. So yeah, just a heads up with translations and notary services. You would integrate dossiers. So if you're trying to register a product for HIV or hepatitis B and C, they need to be tested by a government accredited laboratory. So that would make your time to market longer, way longer. Okay, so that's something to take into consideration. Then you would send it to the third-party reviewer, optional, submit it to COFEPRIS, pay user fees, and you get your market approval. Your sanitary registration is valid for 5 years. post-market surveillance begins, import permits, advertising notice of permits, and then as information, the renewal process should begin 1 year in advance. Tips to expedite the process: confirm your local distributors, appoint someone to work with our regulatory affairs team so the information is flows easily, have your technical files ready to send. And unfortunately, once it's in COFEPRIS, no matter what submission path you choose, we can't do anything. It's up to COFEPRIS to tell us when it's approved. So a project would look like this, a standard review process, more or less 10 months, equivalency agreement, more or less 10 months, third-party reviewer, 8 months, And these are also the time that it takes more or less to prepare an application. If you want third party, it would add a little bit, half a month, and COFEPRIS review times. So these are the COFEPRIS approval times in theory, and as I said before, these don't really face reality. So as a practice in our consulting company, once we hit that approval time by law, we start bombarding COFEPRIS with emails being like, hey, where's my registration? Where's my registration, right? But you have to be a little bit diplomatic with that. Otherwise, they'll put you in the, what would you call it, a blacklist? Yeah. And we don't want that for our clients. All right. So, okay, just wrapping it up, our services. What would you look into working with us? What type of services would we able to provide? Regulatory strategy and submissions, all types of devices, all categories, all classes, hosting and post-market surveillance. If we are your authorized representative, we would also look after your product in the market. So we have our post-market surveillance unit authorized by COFEPRIS. Post-market surveillance is a collaboration between distributor, registration holder, and manufacturer. So all of us would be working together on that. We don't commercialize any product. So that's also something important to keep in mind. Our goal is for you to do good in Mexico. We don't look into the commercial aspect of that. We don't have any economic incentive on that. It's just our economic incentive is for you to do good, and also to be able to provide, if we host any of these products are safe, because it's a very big responsibility to host them, right? Logistics services, find reputable distributors, screen them. We also have are in charge of imports if a distributor requires it. Or you could also, your device could have a Bluetooth component, a Wi-Fi component. So we would import it, send it to the labs for testing, get it approved, get it certified, and continue with the registration process, okay? Advertising. This is most likely for distributors, but we also would take care of that advertising if you want to, depends if it's advertised for health professionals or to the general public. That would be the difference in advertising, mainly. And we also partner with 3 companies because we know we can't do it all. So if you're interested in minimizing risks and it's your first time doing business in Mexico, do your market research. You can do a market research and identify potential markets, competitors, key players. Or if you're introducing a new product to the market and you want to see what others are doing, then do a market research on that product. So we partner with Pragmatech on that. Design and development. This is more for startups. It's not the big scale, big company, but they can do prototyping. They can do also the drawings, the illustrations, concept developing. And we partner with Bioana. They're based in Monterrey, the northern part of Mexico. And lastly, if you want to transition from managing your business from afar, from abroad, and want to start operations in Mexico, we can to a life science representation that knows about the industry, but they also know how to establish a company, register an entity, and we can help you with that. We can point you with them, with Arochi and Linder, and you can get going and start your office in Mexico. And also, they are top firm for intellectual property and patents and property rights. So that's also very important for our clients too. And that would be pretty much it. You know, we have clients globally. We're trusted by them, and if you need any references, we can for sure provide them. Yeah, we look forward to working with you. If you're interested, or contact me directly. Here's my info. If you need more resources, I'll be happy to share you some publications from ProMexico, from chambers, associations, so you can read more up on Mexico and kind of match my presentation with that.
Well, I hope that you consider becoming a fully fledged premium person, so we don't need this archaic email address nonsense, and we can just ping you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, right now I'm participating in the COVID-19 group, and it's been really great. So yeah, for sure. I am interested in joining the MDG group in the premium one.
Brilliant. Well, I'm going to be rich, folks. There's $29 you just heard me cha-ching. But I said this before you made the presentation, and even more so now. This is so much a didn't know what you didn't know type of thing. I'm embarrassed by how little I knew about Mexico as a marketplace. I mean, it's one of our damn borders. Can you tell us a little bit about? I don't remember the acronym for the new NAFTA. Is there a material change in the way our countries trade, interact as it relates to medical devices? I have to imagine yes, but I don't know what it is.
I haven't looked into the NAFTA text specifically, but there is a section there for medical devices that it's included, and it will mainly impact imports, exports. But the good part of this is that it's moving forward, even though the external events that we're facing, Canada, I think, has approved US and Mexico, so the new NAFTA, I think it's the I forgot the USMCA. Yeah, it's moving forward, right? It is moving forward, but I still have yet to see specifically what the information is there for medical device industry, what impacts it will have. I think it would have positive impacts. And another free trade agreement that recently got a revamp is the one with the European Union. So there's also a medical device section there.
I have all the mics open. Go ahead and ask your question. Well, I have all the mics open and you're garbled. So in the meanwhile, I'll just read.
I don't want to ask a question, Josue. Muchas gracias. I think this was a really good overview of what the Mexico is today. And I just want to thank you basically for that information. So, and again, I mean, 24 years ago when I went out of my country, right, this was not a setting. So I'm glad you are basically helping these companies going into Mexico, because I cannot tell you how many times I was at a booth from some of my companies that I used to work, right? And people came in and say, I'm from Mexico, and they, well, talk to Mauro because he's from Mexico, right? And you don't know who they are, how they operate in Mexico. And once you start digging up, going through the process of trying to learn to these people, I mean, you find that it's a small operation in one small region in Mexico City, and it is not a big thing that they tell you. So I'm glad you're doing this and helping companies here have a very successful journey into Mexico, because you're right, it's a great market, it's a huge market, despite all the challenges that you pointed out in the presentation.
I have solved my York problem if you want to ask your question now.
Thanks. Can you hear me okay now?
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, Josue, thank you very much. I agree with Joe. A lot of information that I didn't know. And I wanted to ask you just about price levels in Mexico versus the U.S. You know, if you're a U.S. company and want to enter Mexico with a product that you might have, do you have to, is there a huge price difference? Do you have to have a much lower price in Mexico, or what's, you know, is there a general thing that you could talk about in that regard?
When registering the product or when selling it?
When selling it.
When selling it, yeah, the price difference is, I would say, significantly. I don't have the real numbers, but there is a price difference, and you would expect to sell your device at a lower cost, for sure. And as I said before, the government is one of the biggest buyers. And with the new government, they're saying, well, if you don't meet these costs, then you're out. Mm-hmm. So you want to, the incentive of lowering your cost is bulk, you know, massive sales. You know, that would be more like your strategy in Mexico if you're trying to sell in the government. You don't bet more, like on the unit price, more like in the bulk overall price that you're gonna that they're gonna buy, the amount of products that they're gonna buy from you. Payment terms are tricky, complicated, you know, but that's up to your distributor, you know, to make sure that they get paid and follow up. And challenging as well to sell to state governments. You can do that too with their health systems. And that is even more challenging to get paid from state governments. But you can also sell to private hospitals. There are very big, reputable private hospitals like ABC Hospital, like Médica Sur Hospital, like Grupo Ángeles, Hospital Ángeles, and they are big buyers. You know, you have top of the line, world-class hospital facilities, and here in terms of reimbursement, you wouldn't see a reimbursement process like you would see in the US. You know, in the US, I think it's very controlled by insurance companies, but here you would pretty much get paid per as you sell, as you make that transaction. Mm-hmm.
Good, thank you.
Larry, who was on the call, wrote me. He said, finally came up for air, was able to sit in. Thanks for the shout out. I consult for a medical devices company based in Mexico City and Querétaro, and most of what Josue said resonates.
Right.
So when you jump on premium, you'll want to send a note to Larry Lugo, because there may be some things you can work on together.
Sounds good. So he is based in Querétaro?
No, the company for whom he consults is, I believe Larry's in.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Querétaro is outside Mexico City, 2 hours away from Mexico City. And it's known to attract a lot of big companies like GE, for example. General Electric is based out of Querétaro.
Okay. Well, you know, the way my mind works with my, you know, network, it only recently have I even begun to come up with some kind of way to be able to remember all the important people, but you have solidly locked in one time as, oh yeah, I know a guy from Mexico. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. And now there are two, Mauro.
Yeah, that's what, yes, I know. He's real about that.
The only Mexican questions I ask him is, when are you coming over with Mexican chocolate again?
That's true. And just a funny, but I want to share with you a funny story about Joe. When again, I met him 10 years ago at cardiac science, and I walk into his office, right? And he has this nice record
I don't know
from
where this is
Pedro.
going.
No, but I'm going to show you. Jose is going to appreciate it, right? So it's a little record. You had it plastified, right? You gave it to me and said, this is from Mexico. It's from Pedro Infante, right?
Pedro
So which
Infante.
was one of the very important
singer.
singers in Mexico in the 50s and when the gold time of the Mexican movie industry, right? So I still have it, Joe. So thank you for that. So it's very interesting how things. It's just beautiful. So I don't know, but I want to give it to you. So,
This regalo, not
so
a,
that's how. So now I know how important it was for you. So thank you.
you are important to me. I say your name properly
I
and with
know.
relish
No,
every time we
no, no,
interact. I do
mean,
not remember the record.
I correct that. That's what I meant. The product itself was. I'll send you a picture of it.
Okay. I brought it in and handed it to you as a gift.
Yes, yes. It was in your office. I remember very well. I'll send it to you. I'll send you a picture. Very colorful, orange.
It's right there in your
Small,
house.
LP.
Go run and get it.
Okay, I'll come back.
All right. This is important shit, guys. Anyhow,
I got to run, but I don't want to end the call. So how do I do this, Joe?
Was it you?
No, it wasn't me. I got
Was
bounced
you?
and I came back in. But you just explained to me that I might do that if I leave.
How can you leave? If you hit exit,
Or
it's
is this
gonna
like the Hotel California?
everybody, it's gonna say
And
leave,
I can't.
or it's gonna say leave, or it's gonna say leave for everybody. Don't hit everybody.
Oh, okay. Right. Okay. Let's see here.
Good luck, everybody.
Leave webinar, not end webinar for all time. Okay. See you all later. And by the way, today is
Bye, Ed.
VE Day.
Yes, what is that? Dan wrote me.
It's basically the celebration of the winning of World War II in Europe. And then there's a separate VJ Day because the war continued on in the Pacific Rim, which England didn't really give a toss about, but there were an awful lot of folks out there. So there's two separate. 75 years ago, end of the war in Europe.
August 6th, BJ.
Yeah, VJ Day is a few months
You will have
later.
to wait. I will have to send you a picture later.
Is it attic or something? Your wife has to find it.
Okay.
Bye,
Bye, guys. Have a good weekend.
Hey, Andre, the end of we celebrate V-Day in June, don't we?
Now, the actual VJ Day, which stands for Victory in Japan, is August 6th.
And we does America celebrate VE Day?
Not so much. I mean, we know when it is, but it's not really celebrated.
Well, you know when it is. There isn't a June date or something?
Flag Day, June 14th.
No, okay.
But
All
I do have one question for Jose before we get off, if that's okay.
Yeah, go
You
ahead,
can
Andre.
ask Josue, but not Jose.
Jose. So in relation to a therapeutic device that in the US can be either class 1 or a 510K class 2, depending upon the claims, does it make that much difference in the way it's presented for regulatory in Mexico?
Well, if it's a 510K, it would qualify for the equivalency agreement.
Okay.
But we would have to look into the instructions for use. We would have to see how the CFG comes in order to make the right strategy for your product. But of course, we would always look into classifying the lowest class, and making sure that it's classified accordingly and it works well for you and your company and the product and it abides with the regulations, right? So it just depends. It might, if it has the 510K class 2, then I would look into registering through the FDA Equivalency Agreement. That would be the advantage.
Yeah, because the same product has, depending upon the indications for use in the US, it can be sold as a class 1 over-the-counter product, but with certain other indications, it goes under a class 2. The class 1 is the non-prescription, but then there's a class 2 version, which is prescription, depending upon the indications.
Does it have components in the class two?
It's actually a respiratory therapy device.
Oh, okay. Okay.
In one way, it's used as a respiratory trainer. In the US, that's considered a class 1 non-prescription device, non-510K. In the other one, where it's used to treat asthma and COPD with specific indication claims, it is a class 2 medical device.
Most likely both of them would be under class 2 in Mexico.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah,
continue
most likely.
with premium, but Andre, just as you now know Josue as if I have a question about Mexico, what should he know if I have a question about blah, I should ask Andre?
Well, we're a contract regulatory manufacturing and engineering. So what we do is we bring products from the conceptual stage right through into full distribution. We're a class 1, 2, and 3 medical device manufacturing facility, and so we do a lot of different products for different companies. Most of the products are therapeutic in nature.
I was thinking about Josue as if an American wants to go to Mexico or anybody wants to go to Mexico.
Exactly.
Do you also, Josue, help people who are in Mexico who want to come to the US and then maybe could use someone like Andre?
Yeah, of course.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, of course.
Steve Bixby just went
Andrew,
ahead
where are
and
you
muted
based from?
himself. Let's see. Okay, I've got
Andrew, where are you based from?
He's in New Jersey.
Yeah, New Jersey.
I'm in Seattle, Maldo in Connecticut, and Steve Bixby. Steve Bixby doesn't have a camera that works. Like what? And he lives in a state I've never visited. It's very big, and no one ever goes there. Tell us about Montana, Steve Bixby.
And it's close to you, Joe. I'm not that far away.
Well, close is relative. It's still taking like 7 hours to drive there, at least.
This is true, though. That's true. But yeah, we don't have cameras here, so that's my problem.
We don't have cameras here.
But we are just a tiny little company in Missoula, Montana, so kind of the western part of the state. We make a very small, very simple little medical device that's a real kind of oddball thing. It's been on the market. I think this is our 51st year. I've only been with about 25 years or so with the company, but it's an eye irrigation product used a lot by emergency departments. Supposed to be in about 90% of the emergency rooms in this country. We export to about probably 20 different countries outside the U.S.
Mexico?
Not Mexico. And so found your presentation fascinating. This is just very, very informational, great information. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. And reach out to me if you want to introduce your product into Mexico.
Works. For sure. You come on to Premium and you can reach out to him.
Absolutely.
It's imperative.
Perfect.
Okay, now I'm 15 minutes late for a meeting, but it was well worth blowing off that other guy for this. Let's say that was great. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me, Joe, the invite, and everyone. Have a great weekend.
Hasta luego, compadres.
Adios.
Hasta luego.
Right.
Adios.
Adios for now. Bye.